So we're about to have our Pesach observance in about an hour. And before we do, I just want to have a quick discussion about a tradition that we have incorporated into our Seder meal. And it's an unusual choice for us because it is a Reformed tradition. But I feel it's an incredibly rich tradition, and more Messianic congregations should consider incorporating it into their own Pesach observances. It's the cup of Miriam. And how you observe the cup of Miriam is you take a glass, you fill it with water, and you place it beside the cup for Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet. And together these create a very interesting image. Because on one hand you have the feminine, on one hand you have the masculine. On one hand you have water, but on one hand you have wine, which stands for blood. And it's this water that I want to talk about, because water is present from the beginning of the Exodus story. We always talk about blood, but water is there just as much, maybe even more so. You have the Nile River that baby Moshe was put into. You have all the waters in Egypt, which are turned to blood. You have the splitting of the Red Sea. You have Miriam's well. In fact, Miriam could mean bitterness, but it could also mean water. So you see another possible connection there. And what it does is it draws our attention to that overlooked role, the role of water. It says, let's stop thinking so much about blood, let's think about this water. And this continues in Judaism today. If you're converting, you're going to be circumcised, which is blood, but you're also immersed into a mikvah, which is water. Once a month, a woman has her time of nidah, which is blood. What does she do? She immerses into a mikvah, which is water. And this continues in Messianic Judaism as well. And the best example that I can think of comes from 1 John 5:8, where it says basically these three agree, the spirit, the water, and the blood. And we can see references to that all throughout John's writings, like when Yeshua is stabbed, out comes blood and water. And so we see that blood and water continue to serve a role in the redemption even today. And that's why we pour a glass as well. But that's not the reason the Reformed tradition really has this observance. The reason they have it is to bring attention to the role of the feminine, which is, I think, very important, because we tend to think of Moshe and Eliyahu, when we think of the figures of the redemption. The first redemption is Moshe, the second one, the final redemption, Eliyahu. And who is Eliyahu bringing with him? The male Mashiach. But women have played an important role in this from the beginning as well. We have Moshe's mother. We have Paro's daughter. We have Miriam. We have the Egyptian midwives, the woman who danced beside the sea. Women have been there from the beginning. And I would say not only in the story of the redemption from Egypt, but all throughout Jewish history, women have played a central role, and they're often overlooked in that story. And so we pour the glass kind of to draw attention to this overlooked role. Water is overlooked, women are often overlooked in our own history, therefore we pour the glass for them. And in Messianic Judaism, this is still true. For example, in our foyer, we have many Messianic Jewish luminaries. Most of them are male. We have two women. One is Pauline Rose, who everyone knows, but then, she was there for the rebuilding of Jerusalem. But in addition to Pauline Rose, we have Agnes Waldstein. I hope I'm pronounced that correctly. It could be Waldstein. But she was a prominent Messianic Jewish teacher. She helped with the founding of the Brahms Center, and that's really all that we know about her. She's we just know that she was there. You see where our deficit is. And so in Messianic Jewish tradition, we have to pick up on this deficit and say women have played a pivotal role in the revival of the Messianic Jewish movement. And this is just kind of off the cusp. What about Miriam, the mother of Yeshua? She was a good Messianic Jew. She was there at the beginning of the redemption, obviously, with the birth of Messiah, but also at his death. If we come from maybe a Protestant tradition, we want to get away from that and say, well, that sounds kind of Catholic, but Scripture does call her the most blessed of women. So there's a prominent Messianic Jewish figure that we have to think of as a Messianic Jew and maybe buy back that role. But as we think about, and this is not the point of the cup of Miriam, and it's not something I want to force onto it, but it's something I want us to consider. Because as we think about this overlooked role of water and this overlooked female role, something to consider is the overlooked Mashiach, Yeshua Messiah. Not only has the vast majority of our nation not recognized him as Mashiach, we have actually denied him his role as even a Jew. Or if we recognize him as a Jew, we say, if we're willing to acknowledge him as a Jew, we say, well, he was a heretic, he was a blasphemer, maybe he was a zealot or something, he was a hater of Torah. He was none of those things. He was a pious rabbi, and he was our Mashiach, and a very good Jew. And I'm thankful that I live in a time when I can begin to see the reversal of that. But the truth of the matter is there's still a long ways to go. He is indeed our leper king. He is our overlooked redeemer. And so as we pour a cup for Miriam, thinking about the role of water, thinking about the role of woman in the redemption, I want us to also think about the overlooked Mashiach, and to think about, we're starting to recognize him as a people, but we still have a long ways to go until he gains his rightful position in the story of our own redemption. And so let me ask you this question. Does your Seder have a place for the cup of Miriam, drawing attention to all those women, those Messianic Jewish luminaries throughout our history who have helped with the revival of our movement? And how does it relate to the role of our Mashiach? I'd like to know what you have to say.